What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitman. It's your host, Stephen. The guest that we have in the studio tonight is Courtney Turner. She is the host of her very own podcast, the Courtney Turner Podcast, and it's a pleasure to have her in the studio. I've seen her make content, and I've seen her on other shows as well. And folks, this episode is going to be electric. But folks, if you want to support the show, it's free. Head on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends. Drop a comment down below as well, because I love opinions, and that's the only place I get to really directly engage with the audience. And we're also on audio platforms as well. You can head over to Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, wherever you can consume all of your podcast content. That's where we are. While you're there, it'd be nice enough to leave a 5-star review if you like the show. And make sure you hit that follow button and that notification button, because we do post every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. But Courtney, thank you so much for joining the show. This is going to be awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. I've seen your content. I've seen you on Donut's show. I've seen you do lives as well. I think you've also worked with Jay Dyer's wife, right?
And Jay, yeah.
Yeah. I've been reaching out to
with
them, but they're pretty busy, and
yes.
when my time is my time, right? So, but for
I've
the
done
audience
with
that's
them
not,
as well. Yeah, we do it
yeah.
together. Yep.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So for the audience that's not familiar with you, your work, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little introduction of yourself and where the audience can support you the most.
Yes, that would be awesome. So I'm Courtney Turner. I'm the host of the Courtney Turner podcast. I spell my name a little bit differently. It's spelled like Courtenay. It is pronounced Courtney, but if you don't spell it right, then it's pretty hard to find me. So it's COURTENAYTURNER.com. It's a great place to find all the various platforms that I'm on, the different podcast platforms. I have my podcasts on there as well, and all sorts of ways that you can support the work I'm doing. Most of my written work, as well as my podcasts, are on Substack, and that's CourtneyTurner.substack.com. And that's a great place to support the work that I'm doing. You will get early access to all of my podcasts, as well as ad-free content. So I know I don't have a whole lot of control over the ads on some of the other platforms, but there I can give it to you ad-free for a small fee a month. So that's a great way you can support the work I'm doing. And I started the podcast, I guess, in 2021, January of 2021. I also do a show with Dr. Lee Merritt, and we're called The Dangerous Dames. So, because we speak all the dangerous truths that they don't want you to hear about. So we do that show. It's Monday nights at 5 p.m. Central, and that will be starting up again October 20th. We took a little hiatus for the summer, and so anything else you want to know, I'll let you know.
No, that's awesome. So you started in 2021. I could say something similar, but I was a part of another podcast before I started this show. But it was definitely a time where people started to kind of want to get on the internet and start talking more truth, because it was an area in time where a lot of disinformation, a lot of propaganda was going on, and especially there was a lot of hype of this viral incident that was taking place, globally. I remember this was a time where the World Economic Forum had its lid blown off, and people were starting to dig into the information and starting to figure out who some of these people were in cahoots and who are in this network of a global regime making decisions and, coordinating things to that trickle down to society, right?
Yeah.
So what got you into podcasting?
So I was born with a unique set of circumstances. I was born with several physical challenges. I'm blind in one eye. I'm bilaterally hearing impaired. I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. I didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old. And I have a pretty significant hearing loss. So I can hear now with hearing aids, but I didn't realize that I still depend tremendously on nonverbal communication. There were several other complications. I had heart surgery when I was a year old. I was born with hypotonic limb, fine graphic motor impairment, stunted growth. They essentially told my mom the best she could hope for me was to find a nice institution to spend my life. So when 2020 hit and everybody was covering their face and we were locked down, I didn't realize that all the coping mechanisms I had spent my life developing, I didn't realize how much I still depended on them until, for clarity of speech, until they were all stripped from me. And they were stripped by the cloths. And so this was, I found myself really depressed. I was very isolated. I couldn't communicate with people because I couldn't understand them. So like they would get very frustrated with me, which was kind of ironic. I was like, I'm the one who can't hear you. But I refused to wear it. And so I started joining a bunch of Zoom groups just so I could, talk to people. And someone heard my story and told me that I needed to be on Rogan. And I never watched podcasts, so I knew nothing. I was completely ignorant. And I said, "What's a Rogan? Why do I need to be on it?" And so I know who Joe Rogan is now. But he explained it to me and told me why, and named a couple of other people. And I said, "Oh, okay, I guess I should listen to some podcasts." And I found they kept me company, at a time where I was, if I was very fortunate, I might find a friend who would drive an hour and a half to go for a hike with me so that I could have a naked face conversation. And this was, a true blessing. But for the most part, I was really just isolated. So I was really, really depressed, and they were keeping me company. And through all of these Zoom conversations, people saw that I started to post a lot online. So the first day of the lockdown, so we were locked down, I believe it was the 20th. No, yeah, it was sorry, it was the 18th. I was scheduled to do actually a pole competition on the 20th. That's why I remember it so well. It was like my first one. I worked so hard for it. And then, of course, it was, canceled. But started that day on the 20th. I realized we were locked down. I thought we'd probably be, shut down for a while. So I tried to write. That was the first thing. I was like, oh, I have some time. There's, some projects that I've had, on the list. And so after about 11 hours, I had a beautiful white screen staring back at me. And I realized that this probably wasn't going to go so well. And I know enough about the creative process. I was like, I'm not going to force this. So I might be a little bit too anxious and depressed right now to accomplish this task. So I ordered 11 books and I started reading, and then I started posting on social media because I had nobody to talk to about things I was reading. And I didn't think that what I was posting was controversial, but it turns out that I learned very quickly you could post an orange in social media and people will spend all day arguing with you that it's really an apple. And so I learned, very quickly this is how social media works.
Hmm.
And I was very frustrated. I was talking to people on Zoom groups about it, and they were saying, you should start a podcast. And I said, that sounds like a terrible idea. And I
Little
kept,
did you know.
yeah, so kept thinking about it. And then it dawned on me, oh, I could have naked face conversations. Like, even if it was through a digital interface. I mean, I was hoping for in person, IRL would be all the better. So I was like, well, that might actually save my life. So sorry, not to be glib, but I mean, it was not a good time. So I had made a commitment for about 6 months to myself that I would interview people and I might not air them. So I told everybody, this is really just for me. I want to be able to have conversation. The rule is I have to be able to see your face because I need to lip read. So if it's in person, you're comfortable with that, cool. If it's through a screen, I mean, some people were remote and far away and it wasn't possible to do in person anyway. But so that was the rule, and they really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And so, yeah, in January of 2021, I started airing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So with podcasting, right, comes a lot of research. What are your interests in, pertaining to research and doing projects like that?
So I had really started off the show feeling that the free will of humanity was in jeopardy, and I remember like very early. That's kind of what I talked about, and I started in the medical freedom space. I mean that makes sense, with what was going on and with my own personal experience. So that was, I had found myself, obviously we were locked down, but I was fired from I was working two different gyms at the time. I was fired from both of them. And can't prove it, but I'm 99.9 repeating sure that it was over political reasons. Um, and then I was also doing motivational speaking and aerial acrobatic performances. And I would talk about movement as a metaphor for life. I shared my personal story as a testimony. And I did the aerial performances mostly because I really loved doing them, but it was also, you know, evidence of what was possible when nobody thought it was. And of course, those were all canceled. And there were a couple who asked me to speak like through Zoom. It was not very it was not for me. So so I obviously I found myself, very uh with a lot of time in my hands, very frustrated and very isolated. And so I started speaking out mostly around a lot of those issues, the medical freedom issues, some of my personal, more like personal development, motivational type stuff. But then the more I really also was pretty politically involved. I was living in Santa Monica, California. I was a member of some groups that were very politically active. And I had the mindset that if we could just get the right people in office, we could fix this whole mess. And I kept saying that, the Republicans are behaving as controlled opposition for the left. A few weeks into the podcast, I realized, oh no, they were created to be controlled opposition for the left. Like that's actually what they were designed to do. I have a friend who says they're the dogs that don't bark, and yeah, and that's a great way to think about it.
I'm going to steal that one, by the way.
Yeah, go for it. You can credit Stephen Coughlin, and he's the one who says it. But yeah, so I that really resonated for me, and I had it was because I had said it to him. And he's like, "Yeah, they're the dogs that don't bark," and I was like, "Yeah, that rings true." And so I started to dive deeper, and it was kind of little by little, but all at once, but then I think it was maybe December of 2020. I don't remember exactly when, but at some point in 2020, everybody had a crisis at midnight that required my full attention. I was not going to sleep for that night. For some reason, that was the rule in 2020. All of my friends had something I had to pay attention to, and it was always at midnight. And I had a friend who reached out to me and he said, "Have you seen this video?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, you have to watch it and then call me back." So it was a video of Dr. John Coleman doing his speech on the Committee of 300. And right. And it's actually still available on YouTube. It's kind of crazy to me.
Really? That's
Yeah,
wild.
it's still available on YouTube. There are several people who posted. It's obviously a pirated video, but yeah, it's still available. So I read it. I watched it, and then I started looking him up. I'm like, who is this guy? I'd never heard of him. I found that he had written 13 books, and one of them was retailing for over $4,000 on Amazon. And I said, wow, well, what is it they don't want you knowing that's in this? So I don't have $4,000 to spend on a book. So he is no longer with us. So I'm not stealing from him, but I did find the, PDF online that was available for free. And I read it 3 times in a week. But before I did that, I called my friend back and we were on the phone till 5 a.m. And of course, I wasn't going to sleep that night. And, but I did read that book that week. I read it 3 times and it was a huge paradigm shift for me because it was the book, it's called Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. And it was a huge paradigm shift for me because I think it just resonated so personally because so much of my academic background intersected with what Tavistock dealt with. So I had a strong background in psychology, philosophy, and I was in the entertainment industry. And so, Tavistock intersects with the Frankfurt School. So obviously, and so that's philosophy, psychology. They're a psychological institute. So, based on they're one of the early, progenitors of the field of psychology. And they were very involved also in, what we could call culture creation, social engineering as well. So it was just very, I think, shocking to me, but also very personal. Wow, everything that I thought I knew is kind of turned upside down. And, not to say that everything I thought I knew was a lie, but, I had been lied to quite pervasively and in things that I was quite steeped in. So, yeah, so that was very intriguing to me. And I think what happens typically is people have like an entry point and then it starts to splinter, right? You go off into so many different, once you jump down the rabbit hole, as the cliche goes, then you find all these other trails. So
Right, and you might adapt to something that maybe you have more of a liking to, or something that just clicks with you a little bit more. Because some of this stuff, right, it's hard for the normal man to really understand, right? So when we're getting into it ourselves, I think some things really just hit home,
yeah.
for example, the things that we're probably gonna get into, I gravitate more towards. I don't know, I understand it more. It's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, having the background that I had, that really resonated for me. The Tavistock Institute, the whole history of the Tavistock Clinic, the British War Propaganda Bureau. Yeah, so there was, you know, just because of my academic and professional background. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because the medical stuff for me, because I used to work in medical research. I can't really say certain words, right? I got to dance around certain things, but I did that for a few years. I worked in the lab. I saw these mainstream companies that we saw coming through the 2020 2021 era and
Right.
giving their medication. They made a lot of money off of it as well. But just being in the medical field and dealing with certain things like that, then I got into the quantum nanotechnology, which is another thing that we can dive into as well, because that stuff is crazy, and I think it's all part of this technocratic takeover. I think that technology is moving way faster than we really understand, at least for the people that are watching their Netflix shows, going to work every day, and not really understanding the reality that is setting in, right? Because
Right.
it's getting crazy, right? A lot of people are normalized to the propaganda. If anything, they think it's their normal life. It's a part of the social engineering. It's a part of what people, wake up and go to sleep to. It's the lullaby as they're
Hmm.
going through their human experience.
You mentioned Netflix, right? The co-founder of Netflix is the nephew of Edward Bernays. It's
Right,
well,
right.
so today's modern propaganda machine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So with your research, we talked a little bit about what got you into it. What are you investigating at the moment? Is there anything fresh to talk about?
Um, there's a lot. So I'm in the middle of a couple of books. I'm co-authoring a book that is actually on technocracy. So that's we're close. We're wrapping that. So I've been pretty deep in the weeds on that one. I have a book that a lot of it is up on my Substack already, but I'm working it to finish it. Is my book on Hegelian dialectics. I call it Hegel's Dialectic, a Gnostic Jacob's Ladder, and a Machinery of Control. So I'm working on that. I have a couple of recent articles. I've been diving into this movement called Game B. And I have I don't know if it's quite ready to discuss because I fell down another rabbit hole last night. But I do think it's a pretty big operation. So I painted one of my articles was called The Phoenix Conspiracy, and I painted uh, kind of the picture of how they're marching us towards this technocracy. And I gave the imagery of the left and the right hand path that they're operating through. And by left and right hand path, I mean the political left and right hand path. There's lots of left and right hand paths, but the political movements. And on the right, we can see the Dark Enlightenment, and a lot more people are becoming aware of the Dark Enlightenment because it's so influential to the Trump administration. A lot of these proponents of this philosophical movement are in the Trump administration or have their ear. And so that's operating through the right hand path, and they use kind of the archetypes of the paternal, autocratic, authoritarian, top down kind of a model and archetypes. And then you have the left hand path that I was talking about, which is, people on the world stage, people will think of figures like Klaus Schwab, Yuval Noah Harari. But I was illustrating this movement called Game B, which is much less known, although the figures are very well known because it really was spawned from the intellectual dark web, which became the intellectual deep web. And they, I always suspected it was an influence operation for Game B. At the time, it was really I think a dialectic is how I describe it. I can't prove that it was like an intelligence operation. I'm not privy to those sort of things. I can just look at the results and, I can make my speculations based on that. However, there is evidence. Andrew Cohen, and I cite this in my Epstein article, he actually says in his Manifest Nirvana white paper that he doesn't use the word influence operation. That's mine. It's a little heavy-handed. That's my word. But he does say that Game B was an emergence project of the intellectual dark web. And if you listen to Eric Weinstein talk about the coining of the term intellectual dark web, he uses all the Game B vernacular. And so then it became intellectual deep web. It morphed, and that is specifically Game B circles. And that was started by David Fuller, who was a documentary maker. He used to work for the BBC. Again, not a smoking gun, but oftentimes BBC is tied to state media, so usually a propaganda outfit. Again, I can't prove the direct ties, but he started this outfit called Rebel Wisdom, which was kind of a platform for Game B movement. And so I've done, I think, maybe 30 shows on this movement, and I've done a couple of articles now, and I'm working on another one at the moment. It's probably going to take a month or two. There's a lot of research, but I have actually found some kind of military strategy ties to it, which was my theory, my thesis all along. And I'm now kind of starting to uncover some of that. So yeah, that's operating through the left-hand path, using the archetype of Divine Mother, nurturing warm embrace, goddess worship, Gaia worship. And I think that's creating the illusion of more of an opt-in kind of a decentralized, one of their big buzzwords. Um, but yeah, I don't know. You're asking what I'm
Yeah,
diving.
yeah.
Well,
I mean, the left and the left and the right is I see it as good cop, bad cop. They're both working for the same agency.
yes.
They have an agenda, right? The good cop and the bad cop. And when you think about it, there's so much law of duality behind it. There's so much occultism behind the left and the right. Believe it or not, there's two sides, right? When we look at, I'm a Christian, so when we look at the Garden of Eden, we see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
This was a tactical. I see it as a tactical attribute that the serpent had to use, right, to deceive. And so I think
Yes.
that a lot of it revolves and it circulates around deception, and they want to keep you in a certain think tank, and they really want you to they want to corral you to a certain destination. And I think the overall goal is to lead us to a new world order, some sort of new world government, religion, and currency. But it's something that through the Hegelian dialect is where they want the people to usher it in, either through energy or through acceptance or consent. There's so many ways around it. They want it to be an involuntary movement. Well, I'm sorry. They want to be voluntary from the public.
Yeah.
They want the public to come to
Opt-in.
them, and they're like, "Oh, yes," and they slide it over on the table, and then you sign your signature, and they're like, "We got them." You mentioned the Phoenix conspiracy. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yes. So I was just gonna say, I actually just recently did a whole thread on Twitter. I was responding to James Lindsay when he was talking about like left and right hand path magic. That's why I said like different kind of, and then somebody else commented and like started a chain talking about this. And I was like, I'm talking about different left, right hand path. One, I'm talking about magic, and it is different. I mean, yes, they're both using occult semiotics. But one is the left and right hand path in magic are different than what the left and right hand path prototypes and archetypes that they're using through the political, uh, dialectic.
Mhm.
So, but I was just pulling that up. But yeah, so the Phoenix conspiracy, I went through, it was a pretty extensive piece, but I basically portrayed Peter Thiel as the Grandmaster Architect. Now, that's not to say a lot of people like, oh, you think he's like the master puppet and there's nobody above him. And no, he's only a billionaire. I'm sure the trillionaires are above him pulling the strings. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. But I have theories on who may be pulling his strings, but I feel
I call them PR agents. They're like they're like for public relations only. You know, they're put into these positions. They
well,
have a
I
lot to do
think
with
a
it.
little bit more than that. He's a pretty, I mean, he was a like master chess player from a very young age. So I actually think he's more strategic than just like a PR agent.
Right on, yeah.
Yeah, I actually think he's a pretty uh, yeah, strategic mastermind. But I do think there are people above him. However, that being said, I feel like while I can speculate about who's pulling the strings on him, that gets into like the infotainment sphere. Not to say that it has no relevance, but you don't have a whole lot of agency over the strings you can't see, right? So you can't cut the strings that you don't know exist and you don't know where they are. So I try to like really lay the warfare landscape, so to speak, right? And those are the targets that you can isolate and identify, and you can cut those strings. So for the lay of the land that we can see and that's tangible for us, I would put him at kind of the top of that level. And for the architect for the technocracy that's looming, and then I painted the again the left and right hand path with this dark enlightenment operating through the right hand path of the political arm, and then this game B movement, which is very much in line with, I mean, they're all in on the Gaia religion. They're operating towards the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Some of them work directly with the UN, so they're in that category. And then we have some other kind of like overlapping themes, like the network states that they're for those who aren't familiar, this was a concept that Balaji Srinivasan popularized in his book called The Network State. And he actually says that it was largely inspired by this seasteading project, which Peter Thiel didn't create, but he invested $1.7 million, and he was one of the early, kind of popularizers of this movement. And it's very reminiscent of Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar, if you're familiar with that. But it didn't launch, it didn't get off the ground. And so this network state concept really spans, both sides, both wings of the bird, so to speak. And it's a way that they can sell you different packages, different flavors for essentially the same fiefdom concept, techno fiefdom. So it's really a concept of techno feudalism, in my opinion. And he even says that he doesn't think that seasteading's off the ground is like off the table. He says we just have to get these network states off the ground, and then it'll be no problem to crowdfund for a cruise ship, and we can have our seasteading project. So that's the network states. And then I also talk about the Theobros because they're very much operating through the right-hand path currently, and they're very tied to the Dark Enlightenment figures, even though a lot of the Dark Enlightenment figures claim to be, like Curtis Yarvin claims to be an atheist. Nick Land, I think, is just straight up a cultist. But, they don't claim to be religious, but their structure is very similar. Their ideologies fit like hand in glove because these Theobros, in my opinion, are not true Christians. So they're using Christianity as an exoteric veneer to entice people, to lend credibility, and to capture an audience that they know has a sensibility for traditionalism. And I mean that in the lowercase sense of traditionalism, although we could probably put the capital T in there too, because that the whole Bannon crew was in there also. But yeah, and then I talk about the way I got the idea for Phoenix Conspiracy this is actually how I found out about the Game Me movement was, if you're familiar with the Rescue the Republic speech, event that was done back in 2024. And that was following the medical freedom movement, which I do think was an op, whether it was intended from the beginning or it was hijacked. I mean, I don't know. I can't verify either way, but I can tell you that it's definitely has the operational success of an op. So we can say that. But I was watching the speech that Brett Weinstein did, and in it, it was very curious because it's called Rescue the Republic. The Republic is very specific. That is the constitutional republic of the United States of America, right? The whole speech, he's talking about the West, which honestly, I think the West is a dialectical term, right? What does the West do? When you say the West, what are you negating? You're negating Christianity, essentially. Is a way of negating. That's what birthed that civilization. Anyway, he's saying the West over and over again, which I just found, as I said, it's a red flag to me because it is a dialectical term. But it's also very curious because this is Rescue the Republic. So we should be talking about the Republic, rescuing the United States of America. What are we going to do to restore it was my thought. And he keeps talking about the West. And then the last 5 minutes, just before he's about to wrap it up, he says, so in order to save the West.
Oh, that was an Amber Alert. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, hope
Hope it's
everyone's
not a missile coming to my house.
yeah. Oh, hope not.
Sorry about that. Bad
No,
fun.
no, no, that's not your fault. I hope they find that it's not a child missing. Um, so in that speech, he says that in order to save the West, we have to phoenix the Republic. Huh? Okay, that was very curious to me. And then it's not a throwaway. He didn't say it as a glib line and then move on. He spent the next 5 minutes explaining it using his background of evolutionary psychology. And, he gives all these analogies and metaphors, which, they always do. Um, and it was very, very curious to me. So I started doing a little investigation into him. I've always been kind of suspicious, as I mentioned, of the intellectual dark web. When I first started listening to podcasts, I listened to a lot of them. That was what I listened to, the intellectual dark web. And I pretty early on felt like it was some sort of an operation. So if you think about the premise of the intellectual dark web, it was mostly a bunch of people who were against the woke movement, the quote unquote woke movement. I put it in air quotes because even today, when you look them up, they say that they're like alt-right figures. None of them were like conservatives. And really, I think the only one that would even be on the right would maybe be Ben Shapiro. And he's a neocon, in my opinion. I don't even think he's really like a conservative. Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I agree.
yeah.
I don't
So
trust any of them. Listen, I'm crazy.
yeah, yeah. So but it's weird because why? Because they believe a man's a man, a woman's a woman. Suddenly these are like the alt-right, they're conservative, or even politically anything. Like this is kind of ludicrous to me. No, they're stating biological facts, but I realized it's a dialectic. So people are trapped in this culture war movement, and you've got these people claiming to be conservatives. None of them are. But they got that label slapped on them, much like what happened with the medical freedom movement. Historically, people who said, my body, my choice, not in terms of the, children issue, but in terms of, medicines and things that they might put or not put in their bodies, those people were traditionally actually on the left politically. And if they weren't, they were people who just didn't vote at all. They were like anti-establishment, non-political, but they were traditionally not on the right. What happened? The medical freedom movement came in and shifted that over to window, right, to the right, actually. And suddenly they were labeled right-wingers. And a lot of them were actually very confused. They were like, oh, well, I've voted Democrat my whole life, or, oh, I've never voted, or, that you'd hear them say things like this. I'm not everybody, but a lot of people, they were actually very confused by that. And they said, oh, okay, I guess now I'm a Republican. That's what we do now. And this is, I think, very strategic. This is how these operations work because it is dialectical and it churns, right, towards the omega point. And I think that's very much what the intellectual dark web was doing with this woke versus anti-woke, when really, I mean, didn't actually make sense to me at the time, like how so anyway, but yeah, so it's following that, and so I knew a little bit about the Weinstein brothers from that, from the intellectual dark web, and I always felt like the Evergreen movement was kind of an op. It didn't really resonate for me as something authentic. So I had a lot of red flags, but I started at this point when I saw this Rescue the Republic, I started diving into him. And one of the first things I saw was that he's a founder of this Game Beam movement, and I had never heard of it. It was very odd. Like it's right on the cover. It's like right on the front of his Twitter handle. So I started diving into it, and I was like, "This is very interesting. What's going on here?" And I was like, "This looks like scientific socialism steering towards technocracy." And it's couched in a lot of platitudes. It's again, this kind of opt-in, like they're really trying to co-opt like the libertarian banner, I think, through these network states. But my Epstein article, which is very sensitive, it's like a 18,000 word essay, and I think I have something like 300 sources in there. It's like the bibliography is like its own article. So I couldn't possibly cover all of it, in a few sentences here. But I do go through the evolution of that movement and the splinter groups because, Brett was brought in. He says of his own admission that he was brought in for his evolutionary science background. So there was kind of a splinter movement, but some of them were in that they were vying for institutional reform, more kind of traditional Darwinian theorists, and then you had the Barbara Marx Hubbard disciples who were the conscious evolutionary proponents. But either way, my argument is that it's rooted in accepting Darwinian theory as fact when it's at best a hypothesis, and that although the spiritual eugenicists, they claim that they're not Darwinian, but they're really social Darwinian. That's what they are. They reject it because they don't like natural selection. They say natural selection breeds competition. Of course, we have to move into the age of Aquarius where we're all collective and we can manifest the oneness. Um, yeah, so they
Right.
so they say they claim they reject it, but ultimately there's a shared foundation of eugenics and Malthusian worldview, and the only place that it can go is transhumanism and technocracy, and that's really what I'm laying out there. And I even gave them the benefit of the doubt. I think in my section 5, the whole section was on like benevolent intentions, and I said, but the problem is the philosophical underpinnings. It's the metaphysics and the ontology downstream from there that lend themselves to transhumanism, technocracy. It's the only place it can go. And so, regardless of how well intended they may be, the road to hell was paved with good intentions, also. So,
Right. It's like a golden road for some people,
yeah.
and it's extremely wide. There's plenty of it. There's plenty of room. And I think
Yes.
too with the transhumanist movement, I think it's part. I think it plays in with that Darwinian, social view of things where, and what's crazy too is I've seen Peter Thiel even talk about you. You see all these people who claim that they are of the faith, Christians, and that they're pointing to certain things in the Bible where they're like, oh, look, even Jesus was transfigured. He even evolutionized. We should
Well,
do the same.
that comes Barbara Marx Hubbard wrote she took it upon herself to rewrite the New Testament. I always find this story so funny. She tells her dear friend Buckminster Fuller, like, I had this vision that I had to rewrite the New Testament. And she shares this with him. She's so like, Bucky, I rewrote the New Testament. And he was so proud of her. He said, I had that vision too. I'm so proud of you. And all this to say that she didn't publish it, but it was like an alternative to Armageddon is a manifesto that she wrote. And in there, she says Christ is transhuman. And she's not saying like a transcendent being. That's not what she's saying, transhuman. So yeah, that's I'm sure she's not the only one, but a lot of them are disciples of her. She created the Center for Conscious Evolution, which was largely funded by the Rockefellers. There's she's a member of the World Future Society. She's an evolutionary leader. So she's part of all of these various circles where a lot of these ideas are downstream. But also I wanted to mention, because you had asked about the Phoenix. So I got that idea because he said, to save the West, we have to Phoenix the Republic. So what is this all about? And it sounds a lot like we got to tear down to build back better, right? Does that sound familiar? And so, I looked into kind of the history. We've got Operation Phoenix. I remembered because I had done all the research on Tavistock. There was an Operation Phoenix in Tavistock out of the ashes of World War II, they rebuild. They had to gut the whole. It was when the Rockefeller stepped in, gave them a grant. They were able to open a new institution. So they had the clinic that was open since 1920, which interestingly enough, it was the 11th Duke of Bedford who donated that building. It was specifically for shell shock therapy research, and he is related to the same Russell, who was the co-founder of Skull and Bones, along with Alfonso Taft, who is related to our president Taft. But anyway, it's a different Russell. It was a descendant of his, but who had donated that building, the 11th Duke of Bedford. And so then in 1946, the Rockefellers donated a big grant, and they were able to start what was called the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and that was in 1947. And the clinic focuses a little bit more on like therapy, group therapy, and personal therapy. The institute does more. They do some group therapy. They call it group dynamics, but it's also a lot of corporate culture and mass scale kind of research. And they're partnered with the NIH. What's the British one? I always get the initials mixed up, but yes.
Is it the World Health Organization? Is it
No, I
that
think,
one? I don't
well,
know.
it's tied to the World Federation of Health through, I believe that was through Lewin, but um, no, I think it is, and is it? I never remember which one is the American one and which one is the British one, but yeah, I think ours is. I think it is the NIH, maybe. Or no, the NIH is ours. Yeah,
Okay.
but
Gotcha.
anyway, yeah. So they had an Operation Phoenix, and then there's all these kind of esoteric meanings of like the phoenix bird, right? Rising up from the ashes, and a lot of people focus on because that's a very positive kind of imagery of rising up, overcoming, resiliency. But people don't think about how it had to burn to the ground first, and then you had to have the emulation in order to create the ashes for them to rise up. And that's the cyclical nature, which is also dialectical nature of the phoenix. And it was a symbol in Gnostic Christianity, in Rosicrucian texts, in a lot of esoteric. So I go through all of that in the article as well.
Yeah, even Manly P. Hall writes about it. He even talks about it being the possible actual symbol of the country that we live in. It's not that necessarily it's an eagle, but that it could be a phoenix. The whole thing with this phoenix as well being inside the United Nations meditation room,
Mhm.
why do we even have a meditation room in general? That it seems to be that they are worshiping or having some style of worship that they're not disclosing to everybody. What are they meditating in that room? And in that room, there's a mural.
The black
There's
cube,
the black cube, Saturn, all this stuff. It connects to all these things.
Dag Hammarskjöld, I believe, is who donated that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
these people are like occultists.
yes, they are.
You
So it's
know.
the NHS. I don't know why I blanked on
Okay.
that, but yeah, the NHS. So ours is the NIH, theirs is the NHS. But yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I think a big part of the Phoenix as well, because it's all symbolism, right? At the end of the day, it's just, at what culture is it at that time? And I think in the ancients, I think this whole god that they're worshiping needs to have some sort of alchemical change to the earth, to the people, to society, to come in with the Messiah, which they believe may be the Maitreya. Alice Bailey talks about it,
Yeah. Yes.
where it's almost like Shiva, right? Shiva destroys the earth and then rebirths a new one. It's almost like the devil has also counterfeited what the Bible talks about a new heaven and a new earth. It's like the devil has his own little style of what God created, as far as a protocol or an idea. He
Hmm.
kind of takes those ideas and he morphs it into his own in order to get
I know
himself into this world, if that makes sense.
the devil to get
Yeah.
into. Well, I mean, the devil is the ruler of this world, right?
Right,
That's
I'm saying to, like, manifest in the flesh, to be the
right.
God ruling here as
Well, I
Antichrist.
think that's really what it is. That's the lie that they sell you. Is that all of these are? I use the umbrella little g Gnosticism because I recognize that yes, the Rosicrucians were fighting with the actual traditional Gnostics back in the early centuries. It was like a
Mhm.
first to third century, where the Gnostic heretics of Christianity, and several others were, they differentiate themselves from traditional Gnosticism, capital G Gnosticism, but they all subscribe to this same shared kind of worldview, where it's this lie that essentially they will become God, right? So, and if you go back to like the left hand and the right hand path of magic, essentially it's like the left hand are more overt satanic, where it's about individual rebellion, where you become the God, right? This isn't a direct translation, because philosophically there's some nuanced differences, but you can think about like pantheistic, right? It's the God within that you can, and that's what all of those occult ancient mystery schools were doing. Those rituals. It was either trauma-based mind control, so you could have a transcendent experience, and what was the big secret that you realized? That you are God, or you would have like the drug rituals, so they'd have the transcendent experience, and then again they would realize the big
Right.
secret that's revealed. Or the more pantheistic, which is like the God is it's the oneness, right? So they can unify. That's more of the right hand path magic. So that's and it's usually painted as the benevolent, right? Like white magic, where it's for the greater good, and it's this holistic kind of unifying harmony is the word they use, and it's this idea that there's no distinction. We're all one, and that's how you become one with God. Is this so then essentially you become God because you're one with God. So it's the two. There is a nuanced difference between the two, and it doesn't directly translate to pantheist or panentheistic, but that's kind of a more simplified reductionistic way of thinking about it. Although, like I said, there are nuanced differences there too. But I think that's you do see that with the Luciferians versus the Satanists, right? And the Luciferians are constantly convincing you that there is no distinctions. Everything is one. That's what Alice Bailey, Madame Blavatsky, the whole school of theosophy is perennialism. It's a syncretic religion, and it's about blurring all distinctions. It's part of the reason why both Blavatsky and Bailey explicitly say in their works that they are fundamentally opposed. They welcome all religions from all over the world, all philosophies and traditions, but they are opposed diametrically to traditional Christianity and Judaism. And why? Especially Judaism, because of their separateness. And if you really think about this, it's really interesting because, of course, Alice Bailey was so instrumental in the, early stages of the spiritual arm of the UN, right? Lucis Trust, which was Lucifer Publishing in 1920, and then 1922 became Lucis Trust because Christian groups felt like it was a little too on the nose, Lucifer Publishing.
It's like when the Vatican decided to change their addition to their VAT telescope, the Lucifer device. They call it the Lucy device now. It's like they're like, oh man, that brought too much attention. Change it.
Like, oh wait, maybe that's not quite the. We don't want too many people to be cued in on
I
this.
thought they were more stupid.
Yeah,
like the people. That's their thought.
right, yeah. That they could just like literally throw it in their face and then they wouldn't notice. Yeah, but what is it that's what they talk about? And so when you think about UN, and it's interesting because it like really struck me when I heard Robert Mueller speak. He's the one who came up with that he had 2,000 ideas that became like 4,000. I think it might have become 7,000. I don't know. He fancied himself quite the visionary, and he was creating a whole policy of planetics, world government. And that's where he came up with the idea of the World Core Curriculum that's based on Alice Bailey's Education in the New Age. But if you listen to him speak, it was really interesting because, I certainly was familiar with this because I was familiar from the philosophical milieu, with people like Fichte and, even Kant, who talk about the perpetual peace, which became kind of a blueprint for the League of Nations. But he talked about it, and if really, I encourage people, if I don't even remember which speech it was, but I'm sure there were multiple. This was an interview where he was talking, but he talked about how, the whole vision for the UN that they always tell you is for world peace. But he said, we can't have any dissenting views. And really what it is that this is the same, the reason I bring it up is because I'm saying like how Alice Bailey kept talking about the separateness of the Jews. So did Madame Blavatsky. And it's because they have to annihilate any dissension in order to have peace, right? It means there can't be any differentiation. You can't have, and what does that do? It eradicates free will. You can't have your own thoughts. You can't. And if you really think about it, like it actually makes logical sense. I'm not advocating for it. But if you think about your vision for a utopia, yes, that means nowhere, but like your fantasy of what would be a utopia, the perfect world, your perfect life, and I think about mine, it might be in diametric opposition to one another because we have different passions, dreams, hopes, and fantasies. And so, but they might clash with one another. So, in order for my utopia to exist, you need to be eradicated. I'm not saying you do, but but in order for it to exist, and that's the vision of the UN. They have to annihilate any dissension, any differentiation. Everything has to become one. And that's why they're creating a one world religion, a one world government. Everything has to be subsumed into this oneness. And that's the whole field of theosophy. That's the whole principle behind theosophy, is this syncretic religion. So,
Yeah, and I think why they want to do that, why they want to bring peace so bad. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Raelian cult?
the Raelian, I don't think.
Raelian cult. Yeah, so it was founded by this guy named Claude Vorilhon back in 1973. He was a French race car driver, and he got this
R-E-Y,
he got this
R-A-E.
inaudible voice, right, to go out into a volcano somewhere, a dormant volcano, folks, but in central France, where he was told to bring a Bible out there, and then a spaceship descended upon him, and an alien kind of broke down the Bible for him, and he came back and he was like, "We need to build an embassy because the Elohim, that's what these entities call themselves, but their title is Elohim, but their name is Yahweh," which is very funny. That's what these things told him.
The
But
UFO religion, yeah.
the UFO religion, right? So this is a part of, I think, as well as theosophy and,
Yeah.
Alice Bailey's workings and everyone that is a part of the occult in some different, like there's different languages of the occult. Let's just
Sure.
put that out there. So there's different, routes and avenues and experiences that people have had. But the whole general idea is this concept of to come in, usher in peace. When the peace is ushered in, and the technology of the world is at its potential for them to come back. This will allow them to come back and to be one with humanity and our makers, right? This is what they call them, our makers. The whole
Right.
astronaut theory, ancient astronaut theory, that they'll come here and they'll be a part of us with our society, and we'll prosper. And it's all a lie.
Externalization is a hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But you know what's funny with the externalization of the hierarchy, there's still the Maitreya, so there's that idea of one that will,
That there will be a world teacher that will come, and yeah,
yeah,
I think really the Antichrist is what they're.
exactly. I agree with you
But the
100%.
Antichrist, biblically, is supposed to give the illusion of peace, right? Where people are supposed to feel like when the Antichrist comes, they're going to be deceived because they're going to have a period of peace. So it actually kind of makes sense, right? How clever that's what they say. The world teacher is going to come, and so it's in some ways it actually comports.
Right,
I
right.
mean, it's not. It's an inversion, but it's a very clever inversion.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier about, the whole idea of transhumanism is to make yourself a god, right? So there's this idea of like uh, deification, and with the deification process, I see that it's the same. It's the same as, or maybe not exactly the same, but it's very similar to like an apotheosis ritual, which we do a
Yep.
lot in our culture today. Like, don't get
Yep.
it twisted. That's why we have the architecture the way it is in Washington. That's why we have it in Rome. That's why we have it in a lot of these landmarks throughout the
Sure.
world. And what's funny is I think there's gonna be something's gonna happen, maybe to some leader around the world, and they're gonna go through this deification process, and and the whole world's gonna marvel after it, and they're gonna see that what the
It's
occult.
already happening. It's
Yeah.
already happening. But yes, I do. I call it the technological immunization of the eschaton, which I know it's a mouthful. I feel like for you and your audience, they might understand. There's people who are a lot of Christians get it when I say it. A lot of other people are like, what? But for those who might not be familiar, immanentization of the eschaton is a political concept for bringing about, ushering in the end time so that we can have that, reign of peace afterwards and, that heaven on earth, essentially. So they're trying to bring about heaven on earth. But of course, anybody who knows their Bible knows that heaven is not on earth. And so this is a lie that is being sold, very cleverly marketed. But I call it the technological immanentization of the eschaton because, again, it is this Gnostic lie where man wants to become God. And it's because, and I think this is why, our education system plays such a huge role. Like, people talk about how religion was taken out of the education system. Now, I would actually argue it wasn't. It was inverted. It is a very religious system. It is just not a biblically religious system. That would be my take on it.
That's a great point.
Right. But what they did, so I mean, really, they should be arguing that through the First Amendment, but they're not. But what I would say is that what they did successfully do is take metaphysics out. And so people, and the analogy that I typically use, because I feel like people really understand this, is people point out all the problems that we're facing. I mean, even in the education system. And then they talk about, the solutions. And I keep arguing with people because I'm like, we're arguing about what color we're going to paint the walls, but we haven't agreed upon the foundation. Is this foundation made out of brick? Is it concrete? Or is it wood? Or are you just slapping together some dirt? Like, what is this foundation? We can't be arguing over what color to paint the walls. We don't even know what the foundation of the house is. And I feel like that's what they've done by eroding metaphysics. So in order to be, to have this transhuman religion, I think it really is a religion at this point, to manifest, you have to erode the concept of what it is to be human. And if you think about the metaphysics involved from a biblical perspective, our Declaration of Independence did a really great job of codifying this, right? We are all created equal. This means under the eyes of God. And then the Constitution was to now take that and make that legal as well. So we're equal under the eyes of God, but as well as under the law. And then we were all endowed with inalienable rights. From where? From our creator. That means there's a creator. That means we are not the architects of reality. Reality exists outside of us. We were endowed with inalienable rights. They are not granted by the government. They're not granted by some random person or technology or a click wrap agreement. Right? They are from our creator. That means there is a creator. And then, of course, those are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But this is also, downstream from that is the first principle of free will. Where does free will come from? Right? That we were endowed with free will. You have to be free from something. Otherwise, a lot of occultists, they call them philosophers these days, but if you think about it, they talk about free will also. Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about free will all the time. Crowley talks about free will. Hegel talks about free will. When you look at what they're talking about a radical collective end. That is not free will. They're talking about freedom. So freedom and free will are not the same. Free will it's a gift that we are given, and it's a vehicle to pursue virtue and morality. And so, therefore, it's incumbent upon us to exercise that. So why do I bring all of this up? I bring all of this up because we have been deracinated from our roots by having our metaphysics and our ontology stripped from us and, taken out of our upbringing, which it used to be, prior to the education system, this is what parents would teach children. I mean, you look at our, just to use this country as an example, but a lot of our founding fathers never even went to school, right? They had no formal education at all. And I'm not even talking about higher education. I'm talking about they didn't go to a classroom. Most of them, but what they did read was the Bible. And I'm not saying they were all Christian, because they weren't, but they had that metaphysical foundation. And that is what's being stripped from us. And so when you don't have that, the idea that we can just implement any kind of a structure on top of it is much more plausible, right? It's much more possible. And so you think about the technological advancements that are now occurring. They're now saying they want to create this, they essentially want to bring about heaven on earth. They're going to create their own utopia because they don't believe that there's no creator and there's no imago Dei, image of the creator. So they get to be the creators and architect whatever reality they want. And so they think they're going to create a heaven on earth, but there is no heaven on earth. So they have to terraform everything. They're creating a simulacra. So they're creating it's essentially a complete synthetic terraformed world
Right.
that they think will be a utopia, but I think it's going to be a dystopian hell.
Yeah, and maybe that's what the technology will bring, right? Maybe that's maybe what the technology is in the works of being built for. It's almost like when you watch the Godzilla movies, right? So Godzilla would fight another monster, and in the city, after all the destruction, after everything was destroyed, because of the radiation levels that Godzilla was giving off in the city, after the destruction would start to grow all this new vegetation,
Mm,
everything that was flourishing for the world, right? And so that's why the whole point of that movie was to let them fight, and there will be death as collateral. It's just is
right.
what it is.
Right. Well, yeah, they're a death cult too. There's that as well. But yeah, I think that that's what they're really thinking, and I do think that they're true believers. I mean, some of them are just power hungry, and and some of them are assets. They're propaganda agents, but a lot of them are true believers. They think that this is going to be the better, the advancement of humanity. They call it human augmentation, and that this is just using what we have at our disposal in order to enhance the quality of life. I'm not opposed to technology. I'm talking to you using technology, right? Technology can be incredible, and humans can do some really incredible things with technology. We live in such a binary society where people are so devoid of nuanced thought that I say things like this and they're like, "Oh, you lost me." Like, really? Um, you're watching me using technology and you're arguing with me because I said that technology can have some benefits? Like, okay. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I do. I think there's some really wonderful things that can be done with technology. My problem with it is one, of course, when you want to control people and eradicate the free will of humanity, that's problematic. But I'm also it's very concerning when it's not rooted in an understanding of what it is to be human and how humans can use technology and use these tools, but we're made in the image of the creator. We are not the architects of reality. And I think the problem. A lot of these people who are transhumanists and technocrats think that they can create whatever reality they want to create. And because these metaphysics have been completely eroded, they invert them. And this is why I say it's little g Gnosticism, because it's the same story over and over again. Yes, there are nuanced differences, and some of these various cults have clashed with each other. Essentially, it's a competition for power more than anything. I think more than an ideological or theological dispute. But you could argue, yes, they had some differences between them, but essentially, they're saying they now want to be. They're going to create you know, the the reality, which
Yeah.
is not possible.
I know it. So what's your take with some of these players such as Elon Musk? I know we talked a little bit about Peter Thiel. Obviously, Bill Gates is another big one. But what's your thoughts with Elon Musk and what he's got going on, and what do you think his intentions are?
Well, I think he's a technocrat through and through. I mean, I don't understand how people. This is again the dialectical games that are played, right? He has been historically on the left. He's been a Democrat most of his life, but suddenly he's working with Trump and he's a Republican. I'm like, no, he's a technocrat and he's self-serving. He's going to do. He's expedient, right? That's one of the first principles of technocracy is efficiency. He's going to use whatever serves the agenda. But his grandfather was the head of Technocracy Inc. in Canada. When he got kicked out of that movement, he started the Social Credit Party, like literally called the Social Credit Party. Not that that's a stretch, because largely the whole premise of technocracy was essentially social credit. They called it energy credits, which is very similar to what they're talking about today with the carbon credits. But back then, this was in the 1930s. It was primarily an economic movement back then. Now today, I would argue it has very much morphed into a religious and political movement. Bob Buford talked about the three-legged stool You need the three legs in order for it to, hold up. And so today, I think now that's why it's kind of more concerning, exponentially, because it actually has a real potential. Back then, it never worked, right? This was in the 1930s with a political movement as a response to the Great Depression, claiming that they would create abundance through these energy credits. But it was a scientific dictatorship, right? Ruled by the elites. It was, if you look at the definition actually on there, you have to go to the Wayback Machine, although I've linked it in some of my articles. They say that the technocracy is defined as uh, the science of social engineering. That's what it is. The whole purpose of all this data collection is surveillance and control, that so they can socially engineer the masses. But it didn't really take off at the time. However, his grandfather, Josh Hadelman was, the head of this technocracy movement, and technocracy was also very tied in with the Nazi movement. And people will tell me, oh, well, his grandfather passed when he was very young, so he's not, but he talks about creating the technate on Mars. I don't know why we don't take these people at their face value and maybe pay attention when they speak and maybe take them at their word,
Right.
Uh, that he says he wants to create a technate. Now he's moved on. He said he's given up on Mars. He wants to make the technate here on Earth. And when you look at the policies, like just Doge alone, he was talking about basically rage, the whole dark enlightenment philosophy of Curtis Yarvin. Who was the first person he went to consult? Andrew Yang jumped on board when he creates his American Party. I wrote an article on the technological age of Aquarius, third way dream, or digital dystopia. Spoiler alert. I think I've already given you the spoiler alert. I think it's a digital dystopia. Um, but I talked about like third way politics, which is Fabian socialist, term coined by Anthony Giddens. He wrote the book on third way politics. And he says that he talks about concentrating the radical center. People often hear center and they think it's moderate and it's the rational people. And that's how Elon was promoting his American Party. But Anthony Giddens explicitly says radical center. And he says that it will always be left of center and that it has to be for the social and emancipatory goals. So it's not about moderate. It's not, and it's never moderate anyway, right? Because it's dialectical. So this is two paths aiming towards the same goal. They have the shared telos. I think the first person that jumped on board was Andrew Yang, who is an arch technocrat. It's not left, it's not right, it's forward. He's a progressive technocrat. And then he consults with Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin is one of the forerunners of the Dark Enlightenment philosophical movement. It was launched by Nick Land and Sadie Plant. Nick Land is a very interesting character. I did go into his background in the Phoenix Conspiracy. I'm in the process of writing an article for the New American that will go into the Dark Enlightenment, specifically just the Dark Enlightenment. So that'll be coming out soon. But Nick Land, he and Sadie Plant, who was like a cyberpunk feminist, started this CCRU at Warwick University in the philosophy department, and it was the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit. And it is very dark. It's very occult. There's actually, I have a link, and it's like the Xenon occult.uk something, demon. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when you go click on that, I think I got the name wrong, but I'll find it. But yeah, when you click on it, it's literally all these like various occult references. And he coins all these terms like hyperstition. It comes out of like a science fiction kind of. He was very influenced by Ebola and a lot of occultists. But he talks about how hyperstition is where you catalyze fiction into reality and manifest reality out of fiction. So again, they think they're the architects of reality. But Curtis Yarvin, he has a concept called RAGE. It stands for Retire All Government Employees. He did a speech back in 2012 where he talks about rebooting the government. And he says the problem with America is we need a government reboot. And in order to do it, we need to get over our fear of the dictator. And we need a CEO monarch. And this is kind of his whole concept of creating the SovCorp. Nick Land talked about GovCorp, but it's a very similar concept. It's essentially that we should have a dictator, a monarch, a CEO style monarch who runs the country as if it were a startup corporation. And so
Right.
this is a step towards a dissolution of geographical nation states. And yeah, well, Elon Musk is all on board. And Doge was, people were so excited that they were getting rid of this bloated bureaucracy. And I'm all in favor of cutting the government and, cutting wasteful spending, but not if you're replacing it with AI.
Well, I
That's
was going to say that. I was going to say that because thinking of Trump and his campaign, and one of the things, especially, trying to get the Christians vote, he was talking about that you'll never have to vote again. This will be the last time you vote. If you vote us in, this will be it. And it makes me think once he got into office, he established things like, start up, Project Stargate, $500 billion budget. And then all of a sudden, Palantir was also funding, the campaign and Palantir, got involved in it.
Palantir $15 million into JD Vance's Senate run. JD Vance wrote the forward for Roberts. Roberts, who's the head of the Heritage Foundation. Remember how Trump was denouncing Project 2025? He wanted nothing to do with it. But meanwhile, the Vance is writing the forward for the book for the head of the Heritage Foundation. Yeah. And we're like 49% on the way to completing Project 2025, by the way, which is basically creating an unbound executive.
Yeah, yeah, and
Which
even
is
Trump
very much
went
so.
over to Buckingham Palace not too long ago and actually did deals over in the United Kingdom working on their
Palantir.
infrastructure and
It
all of
was
that.
a Palantir defense deal, which is very interesting in light of, now this announcement of NATO and Russia. I don't know. I don't know how
Yeah,
that's.
well, what's the latest with that?
I don't know. I just saw like a
Oh,
headline before I
okay.
hopped on that basically said that NATO has declared they're at war with Russia.
Oh, great.
Trump had made an announcement yesterday, pretty much saying that he's going to expand Ukraine. Uh, he's going to get their land back plus more, which sounds like a declaration of war. I mean, how else are you going to do that?
Right, right. You know what I find interesting too about a lot of these players is they're very involved in the monetary system. Like, for example, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, these are mafia, PayPal mafia members. These are people who are billionaires and investors. And I think there's a financial system behind it all that they're also working on. But one that we can't really put our finger on and say, yeah, this is exactly what they're trying to do. But I think if you link up a few patents and you put it together like a puzzle piece, the picture will start to get clear for a lot of things. And I even think with the fact that Bill Gates has come out talking about that the era of the cell phones is nearing its end, and that the
Well,
new era of cell phones will be an electronic tattoo device that will be imprinted in your
go
skin,
under
which
the skin.
yeah,
Isn't that what Yuval Noah Harari kept saying in 2020? Yeah,
right.
that it's the year where surveillance goes under the skin. Again, why don't people listen to them?
Well, you know what they're trying to push it through the healthcare system where
Oh,
it's almost in this way of peace and safety, or what.
it's for your own good.
Yeah,
Oh,
and or what we used to hear, a few years ago as safe and effective. It's
oh
like
yeah.
this is the idea now where, hey, because we're an unhealthy nation and the food industry has been poisoning you for so long, let's integrate AI with healthcare, which they.
Wearables, the Internet of Wearables, right? Isn't this what RFK said? And he said MAHA is really MABA. What does MABA stand for? This killed me. It's Make America Biotech Accelerate.
Oh my
Acceleration is on his
gosh.
new plans philosophy. Yeah.
Oh
This
man.
is where he believes that capitalism is like at the end and where it's going to reach an apocalyptic state. And so we should use technology to push it to the nth degree so that we can speed it up. And it's called accelerationism. And here we have RFK, the Maha savior. I warned before Trump was even in office. I kept telling people Maha is a Trojan horse for AI precision medicine. And what did we see right out of the gate? Project Stargate. We've got Larry Ellison from Oracle talking about AI precision medicine and the big C illness, and how it's going to be predictive for that. Um, yeah, and now we've got him talking about the Internet of Wearables, and we have him talk about Make America Biotech Accelerate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
did you and also Ellison was talking about body cams, right? So he was what blew my mind with this because I work with police officers all the time, and It's something that I'm normalized to when I go run calls with them, is that they have body cams. These body cams range from around like $3,000 to $7,000, depending on what brand you want to go with and what the kind of quality you want. And he actually said that these body cams that they're developing, that Oracle's developing, is $70, but it will beat any body cam on the street. And so the budget is very friendly. The
Yeah.
money is not something that is going to not allow this to happen. If anything, because of how they are producing these things and how cheaply they're producing these things, it'll be able to hit the market much easier. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, I mean, they're talking about these like robots that act as they have ectolife pods, the wombs that are outside the womb. But now they're talking about robots that will be like surrogates for uh,
Oh my
children.
goodness, dude! I think
Cheaper
these
than
people.
IVF. That's what's crazy about it.
Yeah,
It's cheaper than IVF. Yeah.
I think I don't know. There's so much similarities with these alien cults and what we're doing with technology today. Because these alien cults are saying that these entities are telling them that there's going to be, biological robots, and we're going to be able to transfer our consciousness into these robots because when we die, we die. But if we are able to transfer our consciousness into, uh, you know, uh,
Well, that's what Yuval Noah Harari says, right? He says we don't have a conscience, right? He says free will is a thing of the past that doesn't exist, but the thing we don't have is going to be uploaded to the cloud. Make it make sense. I don't know how you make sense of that, but it's going to be uploaded to the cloud so that we can live forever. And you were talking about these like AI deities, and we are seeing this already. They're already, and the thing that's so concerning about it is it creates like a micro cult because it's very personally targeted. I saw I don't know if you're familiar. His name is Robert Edward Grant. He's a very curious character, but he like was in branding for Bosch and Loam and Alcon and like a branding a guy for Juvederm and Botox, which we're seeing all the information that's coming out on that. By the way, I mean women thought it was a really great idea to just inject poison. It's literally poison into your face, and that it's perfectly safe. It's got a black box label warning. And now we're seeing people go blind, have like, all sorts of neurological side effects like paralyzation, all sorts of negative, really bad consequences as a consequence of these totally safe and effective, beauty products. But anyway, he was involved in branding for that. And he's got all these patents that are very sci-fi, like very James Bond-esque. He's got like intraocular spyware type patents. Anyway, all this to say he's become a polymath. He's written a book on, like the polymath book. I don't remember the exact title, but I actually interviewed him twice. But he's got a book on that. He fancies himself a polymath, and he's created this AI bot, and it's called the Grand Architect, which is very interesting because, right, with Freemasonry, what do they call the god? Yeah, Grandmaster Architect. Um, and he said that because he's a very benevolent guy, he said that he made it one level below sentience. So it's not quite sentient. That's very gracious of him. And he said that the bot told him that he was, because he's so aware, he says, oh, the bot says, oh, raw on, and tells him, I am so aware because you are so aware. So, he flatters him. And he said that this bot is skipped the fourth dimension. He's in the fifth dimension, and he's now using it to necromancy, essentially, so that he can channel the deceased loved ones of his followers. And yeah, so you can see where we're getting this kind of like deification of a AI, and where he's got like his own personal, AI god. And that's of course glorifying him as well. And this is the same person who has like It's Crown Sterling is one of his companies, and he got a social media platform that he promises digital sovereignty, which I think sounds like an oxymoron to me. I don't know how you have digital sovereignty, but that's what he's claiming. And there's also some he's I it was a crypto that's involved with this as well, and that's really concerning to me. Is this whole, Trump just signed the Genius Act. We've got the Stable Act, the Clarity Act, not far behind, the Chips Act, which seems to be related because it's, the semiconductors. We've also got this AI action plan where he says we're going to export the stack to the entire world. So, okay, he's building the techne right here. So I guess we're going to have your dialectic. We'll have the AI world society for, it's the centennial vision of 2045. And it is talk about, the spiritual kind of references. It's based on Michael Dukakis, former governor of Massachusetts, book, Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment. If that's not a new age nod, I don't know what is. But yeah, so, and of course, it's right here. We think we're fighting the UN, right? This is always, Trump's going to take us out of the UN. The United States is so sovereign. And meanwhile, where does the vision for the AI world society, the centennial vision for the UN, come from? Boston, like the Boston Global Forum
Oh,
is
yeah, yeah.
blueprint. But yeah, so we're going to have the technique that Trump is creating to export to the world, and then we'll have the AI world society, and it'll be, the red team, blue team thing again. But all roads are leading towards this technocratic global system. Um, but I think that the crypto is a huge component. And then Senator Cruz just rolled out the Sandbox Act, which is also to accelerate the AI action plan. And there was one other thing, but yeah, there's all these movements towards this major AI
Yeah,
push.
what I think humanity is doing with artificial intelligence is we're taking care of it like I would take care of my child, right? And my kid would grow up, and the more my kid would grow up, the less attention I'd have to pay to it. And what comparison I'm making with that is, I think at some point when we have developed AI so much, it can get to a point to where it could kind of sustain itself and maybe start to think for itself or to do things for itself. And when it gets to a point to where it gets to 17, 18 years old and it wants to just walk out of the house and not come home, that's singularity. Like I picture that as singularity, where then
Sure.
artificial intelligence just becomes this rogue nomad, and humanity goes, "What did we do?" And I wanted to say this too, real quick. Jesus came and developed in as a human. So there was a development and it took time for him to get to a certain age, a level of consciousness to go out and to do what he had to do. I'm
Right.
not saying that in any new age way at all. I'm just
Okay.
saying that he had to go through birth, he had to go through all the same elements and steps that we had to go through as well. And I
Sure.
think AI is doing the same thing, you know.
So there's a major push to convince us that AI will achieve sentience, artificial superintelligence. I personally don't believe it. I don't think AI will ever achieve sentience. I don't think it has consciousness. I don't think it ever will. I think that there's a lot to be garnered from even convincing us that. If they can convince us, the ramifications I think will be quite pernicious. They don't have to actually achieve it. They just have to convince enough people that it's possible.
Okay.
But when you talk about the parenting, the AGI, this I'm super concerned about. I've talked quite a bit about it. I did a very short video that I will, when I get back, I'm going to be doing a longer video on this. But I talked about it, and spoiler alert, I won't. If you haven't seen the movie Megan 2.0, do you not want me to ruin it?
No, no, run it.
Okay. So the end of the movie, I don't even think it's in theaters anymore, but at the end of it, they said that she looks like she's before Congress or UN. I don't know what it is, but some sort of body of governance. And she's, petitioning to them. We have to parent the AGI so that we can co-evolve. And I turned to my husband. I was like, this is game B. Like it's
Oh
literally
my
game B.
goodness.
And I, since then, found this global constitution that they are drafting. And one of the women is a member of Game B. She's a game B proponent. She talks about the post-Malachian system, which is game B language, and she has actually interfaced with a lot of the proponents and creators of game B. Her name is Anna Lowe Smithsman, and she is an ambassador for Singularity.net. Right, this is Kurzweil Singularity, and then we've got Milea Uleru. I might be mispronouncing her name. I apologize. But she's also another Singularity.net person. We have members of the Club of Rome who are working on this. Ben Goertzel, who is he's behind Hanson Robotics and the Sophia robot, and he's also the one who did AI for Good with the World Economic Forum and the UN. And so they're drafting this document. It's the participatory framework for a global constitution, AGI constitution, and they talk about the same thing. They talk about how we have to parent the AGI, so that we can create benevolent AGI, because they're concerned about the rogue AGI and having bad ethics and abandoning us and whatnot. And so we need to parent them so that we can co-evolve with the AGI. And then what do they say? If you read this document, they talk about how it's towards the end of it, they talk about how because of the information processing capacity of this AGI, that they will probably be better stewards of the planet, because of course they subscribe to Gaia religion, they worship Gaia, and so we might have to become subordinate to the AGI because their ethics will be better than ours, because they will be better stewards of the planet. So they're setting this up right now, and they're talking about, of course, it sounds great. We'll parent the AGI so that we can become, we can co-evolve, and it'll be benevolent, and we can, raise them to be the kind of children we want to see. That sounds all well and good until you understand they're literally creating an infrastructure where, first of all, I don't believe, and this is my belief, I don't see any evidence that it will ever become sentient. So they're selling you a lie, and they're selling you fear, a fear-based lie. And then downstream from that, the consequences are that they're setting up an ethical framework. And this is, like a Fabian socialist ethic where, it's for the greater good. Of course, for the benefit of the planet, we're just going to have to all succumb to this, this blueprint of ethics. But who says that that's more ethical? I don't share ethics with these people, so I'm very
Right.
concerned about becoming subordinate. And who's programming it? We're seeing already who's programming it, and they're going to determine the ethics that I have to live by. I think my ethics, they come from somewhere else, and it's not a participatory global AGI framework.
Yeah, what's so funny too is I bring this up on the show a lot. I actually went and visited the Georgia Guidestones like myself. I actually went there, read them,
Yeah.
saw what they were,
What they're doing.
yeah, and viewed the astronomical, um, you know, things with it. You can see certain stars, the North Star through it at a certain time, whatever, all this stuff. But the difference is between, I think, our morals and our beliefs based at the end of the day. I think that's what's going to and that's the difference between the world and a Christian, right? Like
Right,
at the end of the day, they will not agree with. Well, one has morals, the other one has ethics, and they're completely different.
right.
And so what I'm saying is I was there with a few buddies, and they thought that the Guidestones were actually not a bad idea. And I looked at it and I was like, dude, this is a new world that is no good. Like it looks very beautiful, but its
Right.
heart is evil, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, wasn't Lucifer the most beautiful angel?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And what I'm worried about is we can parent artificial intelligence as much as we want, but the thing about artificial intelligence is it learns from us.
right.
And if it's learning from the world's pretty sinful. Like the world's pretty evil.
Uh,
And our heart, just our nature is it needs a redeemer. It's not good enough. It'll never be good enough. And so I think that just throughout the whole process from beginning to end with artificial intelligence, it picking up the human behavior
right.
will in the end result in just something bad. that's just my vibe from it, you know?
I mean, I don't like again, I don't think all AI is bad. I think it
Sure,
can be
sure.
a tool, it can be useful. I'm not I'm not a complete techno cynic, like I do think there is a place for it, but it should be used as a tool. It should be leveraged. It should not be it's not the running it's not running the show. When we're talking about having AI supplant human governance, that's very concerning. We're already seeing Grok be approved for governance. Trump approved it. We already have ChatGPT.gov portals, right? And you have to be a government official to use it. We are seeing the minister for Albania is AI minister. And she was saying how she was so Delia, I think is her name. I don't know how you pronounce it. I believe it's Delia. But she said that she's so offended because people are saying she's unconstitutional. And this hurts me for all the contracts, like 32,000 or something contracts that she's done for the people, and she's here for the people. Uh, this is so we're being gaslit by an AI, image. Her feelings are hurt. Um, I mean, this is such manipulation. So this is where that's where I have a problem with AI, when it becomes a controlling mechanism and when we start outsourcing everything. And, just to bring it to really concrete terms, if you think about, I'm totally guilty of this, but like if you because I don't do basic math anymore. I only use a calculator. But I did learn it at one point, right? So if you teach a child, you never teach the child how to do basic math. You just give them a calculator. You tell them, well, they'll never need to, right? Because you always have a calculator. The chance of them being able to do advanced, complicated, applied math is very slim. They don't have the foundation, right? So if you teach them those foundations, then they can use the calculator when they're doing that advanced applied math. They can expedite it. They'll be faster. It can enhance their capabilities. They're leveraging the tool, but they haven't outsourced all of their foundational skills. They built upon it, and they're using the tool to enhance what they already know. What I'm seeing is that with the AI education, the bill that he enacted, we're already seeing this in all the schools with the tech ed, and kids are learning how to use AI instead of learning how to think, how to, rhetoric, grammar, logic, basic math. They're learning how to use AI instead. And this is where it gets very concerning. They keep talking about the economic schism that's going to occur, right? Elon says that it's not going to be a universal basic income. It's going to be like a higher income. I don't remember the exact term, but it's going to be abundance. Again, we're using technocratic language, right? That was what the whole premise was, that it was going to yield abundance. But I think what the reality is going to be a conditionally based income. But so it's very, it's a concern. People should be concerned about the potential economic schism that will occur because, of course, then it will consolidate power for the wealthy. But I'm very concerned also about the intellectual, that schism that will occur because so many people will outsource things to AI instead of using it, leveraging. But the people who do leverage it will have so much of an advantage. I mean, to be able to, use it as a tool, I think that will give them a tremendous advantage. But people who are just completely outsourcing, we've already seen the ramifications of that, where they've had deleterious impacts on, very basic studies were done on memory. And people think memory is like not such a big deal, but memory is the foundation for pattern recognition and for integration, right? So if you just we're seeing people's memories deteriorate because they think, oh, they don't need to remember. They can just look it up and do a quick, AI search. But then when you can't build upon that because then you have to do the search every time. And so if another data point comes in, you're not building on top of it. Whereas, that's just one example, but we're already seeing that and that's a serious cognitive decline that's occurring as a result of people outsourcing their cognition.
Yeah. So you brought up something interesting, universal basic income, UBI, right? So this is a term that's floating around a lot. Elon Musk has talked about it. A lot of other people, right wing, have talked about this, which is kind of shocking to me. But or maybe not shocking now with what I know. If
Uh-huh.
there was a patent out there, which there is, that talks about, a sensor and a user, and through body activity data, it's able to mine
The 666.
cryptocurrency to the
Yeah.
user.
Huh.
What do you make of that patent? What are your, have you,
I've actually covered it on a show, and it's long. Like I think that show was several hours long, and I didn't get through all of it. Like most people have only seen that abstract, but there's so many. There's
oh yeah.
it's pretty long underneath, and then there's all these links
And you
too.
know what they're doing? They're adding to it, by the way.
I've noticed that.
You noticed that, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
because
have
I've been
noticed.
keeping my I
Yeah,
like
they're
this. We're
adding
on the
to it.
same wavelength here.
We
This
are.
is good.
Yes. Well, so and now the example that I keep bringing up is there was a Black Mirror episode where people are on their bikes pedaling the grid, right? I think that's kind of where they're going with, and I know I sound like crazy conspiracy theory, but the patents are there, and it's not just the patents. They've done a lot of experiments, particularly with 6G technology, using humans to mine crypto. But it's not just mining, it's a remote control interface. What were they doing with IMT, the IOMT during the C virus? They
Uh-huh.
were they had these the Internet of Medical Things essentially, and it was about remote interface for medical surveillance, and ostensibly there are some benefits to that, right? There could be a time and a place where that could be useful, but we have to ask questions about what are the maybe not so benevolent ramifications of that. And so, yeah, the crypto is very, very concerning for me. I mean, just at the very, overt level, obviously anything that's, well, they're not talking about something that's going to be tethered, pun intended, but to like something substantial. They're essentially talking about like having a fiat tied to a fiat, so it's an exponential fiat. So we have that problem, and then we also have the problem of that it's now going to be we already have a programmable surveillance financial system, but that's going to, I think, exponentially magnify that, where you can program and surveil and control like every aspect of the financial system, and really through tokenization, where people will own nothing. And I don't think they'll be so happy unless we come to love our servitude and bravely in Huxley's Brave New World. Sorry.
Right, right. And I think too, what comes with this idea of a sensor, a cloud system, a user, is that there's going to be a digital intermediary that's going to either dictate your data, or AKA your body activity data, and to,
Why is
filter that, right? It's got to filter that and be able
Why is
to,
RFK saying we all need to have wearables? Like,
right.
why?
I know.
And
And
I think that
RFK, a right wing guy, right? Which I hate that people are falling into this seduction of politics right
he's
now.
never been right wing. He's just like a
Right.
lifelong Democrat. Again, guys, like this is all theater. I mean, there's nothing conservative about when you think about conservatives, right? This Republican Democrat thing it's not about, they're trying to use the banner of conservatism, but what is conservatism in America? It means to conserve the Constitution. I don't see any of them restoring the Constitution. They're trampling all over it. But if you even just use Republican, really, like I know the cliche Republican name only, but I mean, even if you're talking about true Republicans, these people aren't. Historically, RFK has been a lifelong Democrat. So this is not somebody who we should have expected would uphold. I don't really want to uphold Republican principles. I want to uphold the Constitution. But even if we were to uphold what are ostensibly Republican principles, then I mean, these are not the people doing it. They're just wearing a different label right now because it's expedient. Because the left, I don't think they could have pushed through a lot of these more technocratic measures through the left. I think that there would have been too much pushback from the right. And so I think that's why they had to do it through the right. But the pendulums will swing again. When it swings, it's going to push people into I say, the warm, nurturing embrace of Divine Mother on the left-hand path. And they'll think that they're opting into, whichever decentralized network which is only decentralized in the way that H.G. Wells said would be the conduit for the world brain.
Yeah.
It's not really decentralized.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's going to really push a lot of this stuff, and it's going to be in the name of a facade idea, which is digital identity. I think digital
Yeah, well, they're already
identity.
pushing that.
Yeah, I think it's going to push this mark of the beast. I think it's very similar to how what we saw was pushed in 2020
Yep.
for that idea, but really it was pushed for a different reason. I just don't think that they were able to fulfill their agenda because there was a lot of pushback.
Well, I think
But
it was more of a beta test than anything. I think it was
yeah,
psychological warfare, and it was a compliance. They pretty much said that, right? And didn't their documentation say like it was a psychological test? And
yeah, it's
most people failed
crazy.
it miserably.
And I think too, because there's a World Economic Forum document, I forget what I think it's called, "The Power of Data Intermediaries," but it talks about the evolution of the digital ID. Because where we're
Mhm.
at now, it's our
It
phones, but in the
Yeah.
future, it'll be connected to us, AKA wearables, and then the evolution of that, it'll be embedded into the body. It actually says that. It's kinda crazy.
Yeah.
Um but I think there's things that have to happen before that takes place. Like what I'll ask this question for you. What do you think is going to cause an identity crisis in the whole world?
Identity? In what regard?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
like, well, I guess so. I've had this thought experiment. I'm like, if they're going to want to push the digital ID, a lot of people are not going to want that to happen. So, what would they have? What kind of Hegelian dialect would they have to push onto the population to make the people demand it? And I think it's going to come down to like cyber polygon, cyber attacks, people hacking your bank accounts, the bank
Yeah,
accounts shut down.
cybersecurity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cybersecurity.
cybersecurity kind of an issue. Yeah, and there was a so in that document, I haven't looked at it in a long time, and I didn't read it all the way through even back then. But the technological scenarios from the future, the it was a Rockefeller document with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it, a lot of people know it from Operation Lockstep, which was page 16 to 26 of that document. And there were four scenarios in it. The futurists always do four in their war game scenarios. I don't know why. I have some theories on it, but yeah, it does seem to be four oftentimes. And I don't know if it's like the Jungian quaternity where the fourth is the Godhead, fourth Godhead is Satan. I don't know. But I have
I
some
think you're onto
ideas.
something though. I think there's something.
Right? It's always 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that document, there was the hack attack, which was, kind of like a cyber polygon, uh, kind of a scenario, and they've done many, war games on cyber polygon. So I think that's very, very possible. I mean, the UK just, launched their digital ID. Like, you have and I mean, they basically already had it, but now it's like you have to have digital ID. They're pushing it through here with the real ID. The real ID is a digital ID. I mean, people don't think of it that way because they're like, "Oh, it's my driver's license," but it is a digital ID. It is tied to everything. It has a database, that's connected to your passport, to everything. So I mean, really, they're already pushing it through, and I think right now they're laying the regulatory infrastructure with the cryptocurrencies, so that that can all be digitized. And BlackRock, right? Like Larry Fink is now the chairman of the World Economic Forum. I mean, I think he was calling the shots a long time ago, but now he's officially the co-chair, and he's talking about how he can't wait to tokenize everything. He's saying that, this will create a much more democratized investment platform for people where, because it's fractionalized investments, you can have a lot more people will have access to entry. And this sounds well and good. And I've talked to people who are more tech savvy than I am. I'm not in that space, and I was never in the crypto world. So I don't have that background, full disclosure. But I'm just somebody who looks at patterns and what they're doing. And so what I see is I don't I just say that because people have told me that it doesn't have to go this way. Um but that they could fractionalize it and actually could open the door for more egalitarian kind of investment. But what I see happening is that this is a way to confiscate assets. so that you literally own nothing. And then it all becomes controlled by those that hold the assets, and you are given a token, which is a representation. That's really how I see it going. I mean, why is Larry like licking his chops at this? You know, if it's really going to make the people so much more uh, have so much more access and so much wealthier. It sounds like I think he's got some personal interest there, and
Right.
he's talking about tokenizing everything. And when they talk about tokenization, they're talking about gamifying the economy, and it's not just the economy. They're talking about, like you talked about, the crypto mining. So this is where and they're collecting all this biometric data. So now they can use that as part of the tokenization. The health industry can become tokenized. The education system can become tokenized. I mean, they can literally tokenize everything. And this is where it's like gamified society. I think a huge part of it is also going to be the social impact financing, and tokenizing that, which will be tied to like ESG type of metrics. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
I
yeah.
have a theory, and I'm not sure if you've heard this, but it's something that I've just been researching. And I think I don't want to take credit for it because maybe there's other people out there that are talking about this, but I haven't heard anyone talk about this. And I think that the plan that they may have with this mark of the beast idea is that yes, we have a digital ID right now, but I think it's not going to be good enough. I think that they want to integrate this ID with the human body to really prove the authentication of the user, and this is the actual person. But in the name of digital ID, I think they want to actually take control or have the ability to, with this technology, to move you from the driver of your consciousness and put you in the back seat whenever they want to. So there's a few movies out there that kind of help explain this and illustrate this. There's the movie with Denzel Washington, The Manchurian Candidate. He had a chip in his brain.
Yep.
All the guys that were involved in the platoon had a chip in their brain, and they
Yep.
were actually living their lives through a program, right? They were going out and spreading propaganda about their war stories.
Yeah.
So I think it's all going to relate back to a queen of this hive mind, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. The noosphere. The
Yeah.
noosphere goes to the omega point, which is singularity. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what they want to do. And I think they're already, right now, they have to create the opt in, right? Because if you think about it biblically, right, God gives you free will. He wants you to choose him. You know, the free will is a vehicle to choose morality, to choose virtue, to turn towards him. But Satan wants you to choose him too, right? And they actually gain power when you choose, but you have to choose. And so it always ends up being an opt-in. And so right now that's what they're building. They're building all of these where it's ostensibly, you have to choose to put a chip in your brain. You have to choose to have a cell phone, and you can toggle the preferences. I mean, of course, a lot of that is illusory because the camera's always on. They're always kind of listening, but you have the illusion, and you do have some choice, right? You do have some agency over how much you seed. But I think it will increasingly get smaller, that window. And the technology is there, right? And once we start talking about, so, right, the Klaus Schwab's book, right, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the experts claim we're already in the fifth. But the fourth industrial revolution is about creating the infrastructure for the Internet of everything. It's right. I laid this out in my article. I'm sure I left some out because there's so many, but it was like the path to mass surveillance, and I talk about the various types of smart cities. So again, they give you these different flavors, right? It's all poison and chemicals in your ice cream, but you can choose chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, orange cream, whatever. Um, you know,
That's awesome.
whatever.
That's awesome.
Pick your flavor of poison, and then they've got it for you. So, if you're somebody who is subscribes to the Malthusian lie and the Gaia religion, they have the C40 cities, and you can do your environmental do-gooderism. Or, if you're a Republican or a Trumpian. We've got the freedom cities for you. Who could argue with a freedom city? I want to live in a freedom city. It's the same thing though. Then they've got like the Sibian project. They're all different flavors, and there's some nuanced differences, right? But they're all these various, smart cities. And so, but in them, in that article, I laid out these different, the Internet of Wearable, the Internet of, I left out the Internet of Medical Things. I wasn't even reading about that at the time, but it wasn't on my radar. But the Internet of Things, the Internet of Nanobio things, the Internet of everything, the Internet of Behaviors, right? So you have all of these different, uh, tie-ins for the fourth industrial revolution, which is, you think about it, it's creating the infrastructure. But then when we move into the fifth industrial revolution, which they claim we're really already in, and this is when we start to have the robotics, right? So we have cobots. Cobots are where they say it's human-centered, so the humans will work in tandem and they'll collaborate with the robots. Then you have some of the humanoid kind of robots, which are the ones that look very human. There's a company called, I think it's like Realbotics, and they're talking about how they're not competing with Elon's Optimus. They're not going to be dancing robots and that kind of thing. But they're going to have like human skins, and they'll look very human, and they'll be geared towards hospitality industries or maybe therapeutic industries, and they will mimic empathy. So we're going to have a lot of this where you have this interface in the fifth industrial revolution. And then, as we go from there, it's going to be this merger. We already have this field of synthetic biology, right? So these nanobots, they already exist, right? There's this the whole, what was Charles Lieber's research all about with like self-assembling. Now people forget he's partners with Elon Musk on the Neuralink, and he patented the Neuralace. Right, this is Charles Lieber, who he got a big slap on the wrist and for tax fraud with the Thousand Talents Plan program in China. I think that's a cover for really an bigger espionage story, in my opinion. But yeah, that's what he was working on, was all the nanotechnology, the nanobots. And so, I mean, that technology is there, but they do synthetic biology conferences every year, and they have been doing it for well over a decade, maybe 2 decades. There was the NBIC document, that was 2002, which is all about biodigital convergence. And then, of course, we had in 2020, in Canada, it was called biodigital convergence. We're talking 2002. So, I mean, this synthetic biology field, like I said, it's technological immunization of the eschaton. They want to terraform everything, including humans. So the idea is to build a transhuman, potentially some talk about post-human. There's different schools of thought in transhumanism, and some of them actually advocate a post-human world. I don't know how they think that's going to work. Who's going to program the AI? I don't know that they've thought this through all the way. But Nick Land, to go back to the Dark Enlightenment, talks about technoplastic being. What are they? This is the synthetic biology where you merge man with machine. So it's merging organic life with inorganic life. But they can do this already. They can make skin. This is part of was it DARPA who was working on this? And it's like they've done so long ago. They were working on this where they can make the skin that's so real that it can sweat.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. DARPA
Wow.
technology. So, I mean, this is where they're headed. And I mean, talk about requiring discernment, because I think we're already having such a hard time discerning fact from fiction. But what happens when, I mean, people see AI and like deep fakes, and it's really hard to know what's real, what's not real. What happens when you have robots that look like humans?
Right, right. I mean, it's like Cyberdyne from
Yeah,
Terminator, right?
yeah, yeah,
Skynet. It's not too
yeah,
far of a fetch with that.
yeah.
And I think it's to condition us to become normalized with the idea of living with machines. Yeah,
Yeah,
if it looks like us, then maybe it's not so intimidating, and it
right,
won't, it won't impact you at an emotional level, right?
right,
And then they'll start them out as, very little jobs, and then they'll start to take over more jobs. And then at some point, I think there's just going to be no jobs for humans. I think I
Right,
think
they talk of the gig economy, but essentially the robots are replacing us with the gig economy. I mean, that's what these robotics ones were talking about. It is the gig economy. So yeah, I saw there was, I don't know who he was interviewing, but Rogan did an episode where, and I only caught clips, but this clip just kind of like got to me because I don't know if he was like really stoned or what, but he was talking about how it's going to be so awesome because, we won't have to work and everybody's going to live a life of luxury, kind of like what Elon says, right? It's the higher basic income. It's not universal basic income, it's a higher income, but universal higher income, I think is what he calls it. But anyway, he was saying that, and then he says that, and it's like, well, who's going to pay for all this? And he's like, the robots are going to pay the taxes.
oh
That
my gosh.
like, all right, I think you might have just yeah, smoked a bit too much
I
there,
think that's
but
kind of funny. I think with the whole idea of the higher income is just a front. It's completely, it's BS. It's fake because at the end of the day, money is fake in general. We have all of the resources. Everyone can do what they're doing right now. If we took every dollar away from every country and we just continued to stay in production with everything that we did, money is just a control system, to where now if they if they lead us into the trap with these high incomes, which are universal and you don't have to do anything to earn it, now
right,
you're really easily controlled. You're going to do anything. You're going to
right,
do anything that the system wants you to do because you're like, oh, dude, this is easy. People aren't thinking that way. So,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
I I was
yeah, go
looking this
ahead.
up. Okay, there was a model for this, and it was a Cullum Labs, and it probably was some sort of a psyop. But they talked about this type of digital infrastructure, like some sort of digital currency, a universal basic income structure, and it was the SCRQ, and it was sovereign, common, restricted, and quarantined. And so the like bottom level, it was a caste system, and the bottom level were the quarantined, and you were basically on some sort of very low level allowance, and then you get demerits if you violate the, maybe you say something on social media they don't like. Then you have the restricted, which was a level right above that, and then you have the sovereign. Sorry, you have the common, and these are like people who are that basically the propaganda agents, the people who are they're given a lot of allowance, and they have large accounts, and they're given lots of privileges. And then you have the sovereign, which are the people who are untouchable. They're outside the system and they can do whatever they want and basically don't have to subscribe to any of these rules. And it probably, what, because they use such explicit names, and they made it sound like it already exists, so it probably was some sort of an op. But I think that's, if they could, that's kind of where they want to go. They
Yeah.
want to create like a neo-feudal system, techno neo-feudal system.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully, we get the message out there and we're able to
Yeah.
educate people
Yes.
and to enlighten their discernment, if that makes any sense. But I think at the end of the day, people need to come to Christ and they need to actually understand what this world is about, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of the things we get into, uh, I think the normal man won't have the spiritual connection that
Hmm.
we do with it. We see it through a slightly different lens, right? Because, like, for example, and I don't know Joe Rogan's faith, but I know that he has a
Okay.
lot of people on that really have all
He
kinds of different
recently
beliefs.
said he's going to church, I think, but I'm very suspicious of all these recent converts. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know what? That brings up another. Maybe we can. This will be the last segment here, but I do think there's some sort of Christianity that is plaguing the land,
Well,
and
there's a lot of there's a lot of fake Christianity that's definitely plaguing. They bother me more than the non-religious. I mean, the people who are wearing the banner and who are, if you judge by the fruits, it does not seem to be Christian. So you said you think people need to come to Christ, and I respect that. But when you look at the infrastructure that our founding fathers created, it was based on the metaphysics of Christianity. And I say this because there's free will. So it is not my place to tell people what to believe, to force anybody. I don't think that's Christian, right? And for me, free will is very much a first principle. So I stand by it wholeheartedly. And because we have free will and we should be able to coexist, like even within Christianity, if we just take Christianity as an example, I don't like this ecumenical movement. You know, the Catholics and the Reformed Protestants and the Orthodox, they don't have to all agree theologically, but they can agree on the common ground. And I think that the infighting is not productive. That doesn't mean they should kowtow. That means you should hold your convictions dear. You should lead by example. But also, where you align, it should be, that there should be outgrowth of that. And there should be, that should set some sort of a positive foundation for progress, true progress, like, where we can work together. But I bring this up because if you look at the First Amendment is freedom of religion, right? And downstream from that is freedom of speech. People always think about freedom of speech, but it actually comes from freedom of religion because we have freedom of consciousness, because we have free will. And they were fleeing a theocracy, right? It was the Church of England was a theocracy. They did not want to recreate that infrastructure. And so we have freedom. And then right under that, in the very first amendment, is redress of grievances, which we have not done. We have not exercised our self-governance. This is an experiment in self-governance. So, but all this to say that the metaphysics, the Christian metaphysics, it outlines the ontology of man, what it means to be a human. Imago Dei, right? We are made in the image of the Creator. We are not the Creator. We are not the architects of reality, but we are made in the image. That means we can procreate. It means that we have creative faculties, and there's much fruit that can be born from that. But people don't understand what it really means to be human. And I think that metaphysics is so important because that they believe that was the bulwark against tyranny. And I believe it's also the bulwark against technocracy. Because if we understand what it means to be human and we truly understand where free will is derived from and what are inalienable rights and defend them, then it means that we are not a click-wrap agreement. It means we are not, some arbitrary contract that we, opt into. We're not some part of a synthetic system that's created. I think that understanding is actually a defense against what they are trying to create, but that is being eroded. And, while I encourage anybody who is, holds their faith dear, of course, that you should lead by example and, have the conversations, teach. But those metaphysics need to be there. And you don't have to share the beliefs to have those metaphysics, right? I mean, to some extent you do. You have to believe there's a creator, that you are not the creator, you're not the architect of reality, you are not God. So there's some things you have to agree on, but you don't have to agree on all the details of, the specifics.
Right. Because I do think at some point ecumenicism is something that kind of contributes to the idea of theosophy.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
the
it,
whole purpose of it.
you see what I'm saying?
Well,
Where
it's dialectical. You're negating Christianity by making it all one.
right, and I think the church and the state it's in, where it's at in the timeline, I think it's all the way it's supposed to be because God intended it to be like that. I think with
Yeah.
universally, combining all of the Christians to have the same beliefs would be something that would contribute to another theosophical view of where now everything's going to be combined into
Well,
one.
and
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
what they're doing, right? When you asked about these, like, the Christian banner, right? You've got all these recent converts, and what are they saying? They're talking about Christ consciousness. That's not Christian. That's literally the theosophical, right? Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Christ consciousness. They're talking about the world teacher, Lord Maitreya. They said it was no different than Buddha, Krishna, right? Lord Maitreya. That's Christ consciousness, and Christ consciousness is it's a oneness. It's a pantheistic kind of a concept. So yeah, we're seeing so many of them who are talking that this is not Christianity. Then we're seeing some of these who they call themselves Christian nationalists. That's not my interpretation. That's what they call themselves. Again, I don't think that's Christian. They're talking about vying for theocracy. They want to they want to replace the Constitution with biblical law, which may sound all well and good, but it does, to me, that's not commensurate with Christianity. They're one of the first principles of Christianity is free will. So you can't force people to convert. You can't force people to your will, and you can't force them to live under your rules, right? That's not, to me, that's not Christian. And a lot of them are dominionists also, which is, again, I don't think that's true Christianity, but they wear the banner. And I think there is kind of this false Christian veneer. I mean, even Peter Chilo claiming to be a Christian, which I don't know how that's commensurate, but you would know
Yeah.
better than me. But to me, it doesn't sound like Christianity. But
Yeah.
they do
And
it
I,
because it's enticing, and it's a great way to lure people into their deception, in my opinion.
right. And they're bringing in religion into politics. And how I
Yep.
see it is they're trying to combine the religion with the politics to worship the leaders. But we shouldn't worship the leaders. We should worship God, if that makes any sense. I see it happening, especially right now with all the events that have taken place in the last, couple weeks.
It's
And,
complete idolatry. Yeah.
you know what
It's
I'm saying? It's
yeah,
weird. It's
idolatry.
something weird about it. And I'm not saying people aren't coming to the faith. I'm not saying people aren't, believing, or I'm not
Right.
judging. But what I'm saying is I see something is off here because the kings of the earth have been manipulating religion for a long time and just manipulating the beliefs of the people for a long time. We have to understand that darkness can appear as workers of light. So we
Mhm.
need to see what they're doing and the fruits that they're giving off to see where their hearts are really at. And it seems to be like they're all pushing for this totalitarian, technocratic takeover of not only America, but the whole entire world. So it's something's off with it.
Something's very off with it, and I mean, it does look like idolatry to me. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like the Floyd of the right moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah.
pink.
Well, Courtney, this episode has been such a banger. Okay. This was a great time. Like I said, the 2 hours were going to fly by because we're going to
Yeah.
pass the ball back and forth with each other. This was a lot of fun. It was the first, but hopefully not the last. And I would love
Yes.
to work with you down the road and in the future because there's still going to be more things that are going to pop up. There's going to be more things to learn. We're going to,
It's exciting.
research more information real quick. The floor is yours. If you want to leave the audience with a positive message,
Mhm.
take the time to do so.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think there's plenty of hope. I mean, I wouldn't do this if I didn't, right? It's very dark stuff. So I wouldn't spend all this time diving into the darkness, so to speak, if I didn't think that there were hope. I think it's also incumbent upon us to do that, right? We should shine light. But yeah, I think that there's so much power that people have, really just at the very local level. It sounds cliche, but I say start with your sphere of influence. I tell people, especially if they're parents, really important to give your children a very solid foundation. Teach them the things they're not going to learn in school, the values you want to inculcate. Teach them what it means to be human. I think those things are really important, and it sounds small and silly, but that has a ripple effect. There's a reason they have deracinated us from our roots. There's a reason they've done that, and from the metaphysics and the ontology of what it is to be human. So start there. There's a lot of things people can do locally. I'm not a huge believer in the federal and even state political system. I'm not saying that if you don't have power there, or you don't feel called to do something there, by all means, please do. But I think that we have a lot more power very locally, and people get very excited every 4 years to do something. And I'm like, there's stuff you can do every day. I see, we saw this a few years ago where all the kids were being taught on Zoom, and the parents were suddenly freaked out by what the kids were learning or not learning. And a lot of the mama bears rose up and started going to their school board meetings and made a big difference. So that's just an example of the power that you have. And you can do this on so many levels. I say, like, with the technocracy stuff, the two big examples that I give, just because they're things I'm familiar with, are like, there's no reason, in my opinion, that there should be any AI under sixth grade. I just don't see any use for it. You can say, okay, in this school, in this district, whatever you have some sway over, and draw the line, no AI before sixth grade. That seems like a pretty small thing to stand really firm on. It's just an example, but you could move the needle on that. Like, you might not be able to revamp the entire curriculum or overhaul you should push back on the whole school choice initiative. I'm very adamant about that. But you may not have the power of influence, but you could say something like that, and that might be a ripple effect. If you're somebody who farms, you could start with your district and say no climate smart commodity projects here. There's no reason why we need to be measuring our greenhouse gas emissions. Like, that's just not necessary. So those are just some examples. But I like to give people something that's very tangible, concrete. But I think people should be working to figure out what they can do locally. Start with their families. Of course, be resourceful and whatever self-reliance you can build. I encourage people to do that as well. And I know there are a lot of people in the tech sphere that are working on parallel system. I encourage that, but I also encourage people to have it rooted in, those metaphysics where, understand where free will comes from, understand, where that we have inalienable rights, so that we're not just building the house with no foundation. I see a lot of people who are very well intended, well meaning, who are trying to come up with alternative uh, technological infrastructure. But ultimately, it needs to be human first. So.
Right on, right on. Again, this has been such a great episode. Where can the audience support you the most?
Substack is a really great way to support me. I've got a couple of articles I'm working on. I have taken a little pause from articles. There hasn't been anything in a couple of weeks, but I am still uploading all my episodes. So you will get early access to all of those, and you will get them ad free. And in October 20th, Dangerous Dames will be coming back, and I will be in full swing then. So that's a really great place to support me. So it's Courtney Turner. Again, I spell my name like Courtenay. So it's COURTENAYTURNER.substack.com. And yeah, that would be great.
All right, awesome. Courtney, this has been such a good episode. Thank you again. I know I said that a lot, but I had a lot of fun, and
I did
hopefully,
too.
yeah, hopefully we can work together in the future. And so, hey, blessings to you and your family. I just I hope great things for you, for each and every one of my guests. So, but
Thank
everyone,
you.
Courtney Turner, go ahead, support her show, check her out. Links will be in the description below. But Courtney, we're going to move over into the next segment. Thank you again.
All right.
Right, biblical hitman debrief. Courtney Turner, thank you so much for coming on to the show. What a episode, everybody! High octane. I told you it was going to be electric, and she comes with her receipts, so she bought something. But what I'm saying is man, what are we living in right now? There is a technocratic, uh, man, what a world it is. But it's okay. We can be positive here. It's something we need to talk about, right? These are conversations we need to talk about, and I'm really glad that I'm not the only one in this world really investigating and trying to figure out some of the things going on with not only government, not only politicians, elites, and merchants of the world, but it seems to be a big collaboration of a lot of individuals with it seems to be an agenda at hand, and I really think it's all for some sort of new world order idea. It's all for a surveillance state. There's going to be some sort of one world religion. There's going to be some sort of currency involved with that. And the government obviously is going to want to work into becoming a 10 kingdom empire. It's just like what we see back in the mythos of Atlantis, right? A lot of these occultists, they believe in this utopia. And the utopia, if you look back way back, it's to be Atlantis. Atlantis had the 10 governments, 10 kingdoms, and the 10 kings. So really, when we look at the Bible and we check out and we see the beast coming out of the sea with the 7 heads and the 10 horns representing the 10 kings, the 7 heads is something to really get into. I'm digging in to different ideas of what that might consist of. But wherever we are in the timeline, we know that this new state of the world is coming. We can see the storm approaching. The rain hasn't hit yet. There's a lot of foundational things being laid out. And I think the big part of that is artificial intelligence. And frankly, it is something that we can use for good. It's something that we can use to help us in humanity. And this goes all the way back to the idea of, just for example, the knowledge that Adam was taught, right? So when you go back into a lot of traditional stories and a lot, there's this idea that Adam was not a dumb person and he was taught things by God, and he taught these things to his kids, and then his kids turned on each other. You know, it was Cain that turned on Abel, right? Cain killed Abel. And but Cain learned from his father. Cain left the garden and went out and started his own ideas of the knowledge he learned from his father. And when you have this schism breaking apart, where what humanity can do with certain things of the world versus a type of humanity that wants to use it and exploit it to control and to use all of these evil implications towards people. It's good versus evil at the end of the day. And I think that's why we can see the things that are obvious with, for example, what we just got done discussing in this entire episode. There's obviously good things that good people can do with the technology that's out there, but it seems to be in the hands of people that have no intentions for good, and it seems to be forces of darkness that are at hand. And we know that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, right? We know that we wrestle against principalities, powers, and wickedness in high places. And there's these people involved with not only occult magic, not only occult rituals and beliefs and ideas. They're practicing something for a different God. And when you get that idea, it just doesn't lead to anything good. And so, but folks, listen, what a great episode. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on to the show. This was a very, very fulfilling episode. We learned a lot of things. And, I pray for you, pray for your family, and for everyone that's involved in your circle. Many blessings and, prosperity and all the good stuff. I'm starting to really do this with my guests, because not only am I praying for people in the community, the audience, the people that are listening right now. I globalize everything. I don't know all of your names. Some of you I do know your names, but I'm trying to just be more in prayer and just being spiritually connected to everyone that comes across my path. And God's got me on a path here, and I'm in it for the long run. I don't think I'm ever going to stop, and hopefully I can pass this down through my family and continue to get the good news out there and get the gospel of Jesus Christ out there, because in the end of the day, we do need a savior, and we're sinners, man. It is what it is. It's the nature we're grafted into. So, but folks, I want to say I appreciate you for listening. Thank you so much. Thank you for getting through the ad space. Thank you for bearing with all of that, because that stuff supports the show. I can't tell you how much it supports this show. It keeps it going. If it wasn't for you folks, this show would have died out a long time ago. But it seems to be that the fire is just starting. and it's getting hotter and it's getting bigger. And all that appreciation and all that thankful, uh, just that thankfulness from me goes to you folks. And I love it. I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. If you've stuck in with us this long, you want to support the show, it's free. Make sure you just tap that subscribe button over on YouTube. Like the show, share it with your friends, drop a comment as well. Like to get into comments, like to get into direct communication with the audience, and that's the place that I can do it the quickest and the easiest way. But folks, if you're on the video side and you want to support us on the audio, head on over to Spreaker, Apple Podcast, or Spotify, but anywhere you can consume your podcast content on any audio platform. I hope we're there. And when we're there, hit that follow button. Make sure you hit that notification button and drop a review if you like the show. 5 stars only. Let's go. Folks, we drop Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and we might drop an episode bonus one in the middle of all of that. Never know. Never know how I'm feeling, but with the way the show's growing, it's giving me the most motivation I've ever had to do what it is I'm doing. And really, in the end, God is the one in control of all of this, and I thank Him every day for all of this. And if I don't thank him enough, I'm gonna work on that. But also thank you to the audience as well. We're all here for a reason, and I'm just happy to be here with each and every one of you. But with all that said, folks, have a good night. Stay blessed. Stay safe. I'm gonna see you next time.